So for those who missed the talk yesterday, I'm Mikael Monty, Widenius, just called me Monty, creator of MySQL and MariaDB. When MySQL got sold, I did put my money into three different things. Saving MariaDB, creating Open Ocean Capital, which is an investment company to help other people in Europe succeed, and using the things we learned while creating MySQL and MariaDB. And then the rest I put into a nice house for myself. So if everything else fails, at least I got a house. So this is about what I learned about how making money on open source. And please, if you have any questions or don't understand something or want to clarify, please ask. I have some instant gratifications for those who ask something. So I believe that the open source free software is a better way to develop software. That's why we made MySQL free. Actually, I used free software since '83. Always wanted to give something back, but to be able to give something back and actually be able to do a project, you need some way to monetize on that. And back in the days, most of the open source project was done by somebody doing something on their free time and then working on something else beside it to be able to do that. And MySQL was the first project that we believed that we can get money by working full time on that and actually make a profitable business and compete with closed source companies. So one of the reasons people believe in that open source is a better way to develop software is that you get more eyeballs and on the source. In other words, you get better code. The truth is that nobody will ever look on most of your code. There are lots of other people testing your code. That's true. We're testing things in ways that you can never expect, and that actually makes the code more tested. And because it's open source, when it fails, then people will look at it, and they're getting fixed. But it's just not because everybody is amazed by your code. You don't believe it. So, how many of you are entrepreneurs trying to work in your own small company? Okay, that's actually more than in most talks that I have. That's good. And the other ones, who is not working, studying. Okay, so everybody has a job. That's good. But so this also applies for people in companies who see that, hey, this is something that you could make better if you made it open source. But then you have to convince the management this is actually a better way to earn money. And that's what this talk about. I could never have done MySQL and compete with giants like Microsoft and Oracle without being open source. The problem is mostly with open source, if you do it wrong, is the license. So this is by Bruno Louvagier. I don't know how to translate. He had made a product like iText using for displaying PDFs. It was used by lots of companies. It was GPL, actually Apache, and he basically made no money out of that. And he has a really good blog about his problems. And then he changed the code to AGPL, and because AGPL, you can't use it behind a website or in almost any commercial context without having to publish that code and your code. And companies said that, how can you do this? This is awful. You are not doing open source. I got a lot of bad press for that. AGPL is fully open source. It actually enforces even more sharing. And after doing that, he suddenly became profitable because he got some people be forced to pay. So this is for people who want to either do business on open source or understand how to do that. And it's not about only doing the traditional open source that you have an open source product and then you do some support and maybe you call it support subscription and sell it per year. But the problem with that is that if you want to do support, you will get about 20% profit per support engineer. If you're lucky, you get a little bit more, but 10 to 20. That means if you want to develop a project, actually create something new, for each engineer you need 5 support people, and that doesn't scale. You can't compete with companies like Microsoft or Oracle or any of the big ones under those circumstances. So you need a way to force people to pay. So I believe that open source is a better way to develop software. There are much more developers, you have maybe get more spread, and you get better bug reports, and if you're lucky, you even get people who will give you a patch for the bug. And it works very good for projects that are freely used by a lot of companies. So there are products like Linux that actually is evolved, getting better without having one company behind it. But that's because Linux is something that you can easily embed into your own product. So Oracle is selling Linux Unbreakable and making money a lot of money on Linux with very little contributions. A lot of people have Linux in their hardware and sell it, and it's in their interest that Linux gets better. But that doesn't help you if you want to create your own product and in some space, home automation or something, and change the world. You basically don't get enough money to pay developers if you just try to do it with consulting. So the top reasons for creating an open source project is that usually you have one of your own problem that you solve, and then you notice that, hey, this is something that could be useful to do open source. That's what's happened with MySQL. I didn't create MySQL as a commercial product to be open source original. I created it to solve my own problems in my own little consulting company, which I worked with order to be founders of MySQL who was in Sweden. Or you have a research project that was Linux. There's lots of open source that are created in-house and then realized as open source. For example, Netscape wanted to change the world, and they noticed that they can't compete with Microsoft, so they tried to make it open source. But they did it the wrong way and failed. But still, there are a lot of companies now try to do that. And there are some people who want to actually create something and then just because they want to give it back. But still, you need to have a reason for doing that. You get money, you need money and time for doing that. And there's some companies who have idea that, hey, let's create this product, release it open source, and change the world, like the way they did with MySQL. And having the investment company, I see a lot of companies coming to me and say that, hey, we have this great product, open source or closed source or whatever, and we want to invest into us and help our business. In some cases we can do, but if they are fully open source, Apache or BSD, there's no way we can invest into it. I will go to that later. So this is a slide I use with politicians and people who want to understand how does the open source movement work, why are there open source products, and why are people part of it. I would say that this is because this is human nature. I have a very low opinions of humans. That's for you. Both for you and for me and anybody else. I think that we are by nature, we are lazy, cheap, and only thinking about ourselves. This is why open source works. Because why do you participate in open source project? Because you have your own problem that you want to solve. You have a product, open source, and then you notice that this almost works for my needs. So you go in and expand it for what you need for either you or your customers. So you do it for yourself. And sometimes you also do it for reputation. But you give back to the community because you are lazy. You don't want to have to patch the software for each update. Much easier to give back. And why did you use open source in the first place? Because it was cheap and you could just get it. You didn't have to pay for it. Human nature. That's why open source works. And when you tell it to politicians, they say, "Ah, they are just like me." And they understand it. So, before starting an open source project, many of these slides are used to be as things that you should think about if you want to start an open source development company. There are way too few who are doing that, and I hope that by having this talk, I can encourage more people to do that. So first check, does there already exist a project in this region? And this was something that for many companies that's wrong, who actually want to participate in open source. Sun. Back in the days, Sun was one of the companies who produced not maybe most open source, but more open source than most other companies. But they did it the wrong way because they looked at some project and saw that, that's very good, but we could do it much better. So then they went to their CTO department and there they developed something similar that they thought much better. Then they just released it, said, use this instead. And that means that they, the original people who were working on the original project, they will not be very happy with this, and they will also they got a bad reputation for not participating. And why would somebody want to participate with them if they're not participating with you? So if you want to change the word, and you think that it's a project you're doing that, be part of that project and help enhance it. And if there's nothing that works, then you can create your own thing. And also be aware that there is lots of old projects in SourceForge, GitHub, and other places that has failed. So first look, does the other project exist for doing the same thing, and try to figure out why they failed so you don't do the same mistake. And when you start something, try to find a company or a group who can actually sponsor you. Many of the things that I did early for the predecessor of MySQL, for Riga, was consulting works for companies that I work with who need more and more features. So I basically use them to pay for my time. And you need that at the beginning. And they also help you to solve a problem that is your product useful. If there's one company who's using it and actually willing to pay you for enhancing it, you know that you're doing something that is at least useful for somebody. The reason MySQL was useful and successful was not that we made the best data product ever, at least not in the beginning. It was just that we did something that we needed, and we released it to the world. We noticed that everybody else needed it. So we were very lucky to be doing the right thing at the right time. So lots of things is timing and luck. With open source, just creating the product is not enough. You also need to create a community, because otherwise you don't get much of the benefits that you can get with open source. And for creating a community, it's just not enough like Netscape did. Here's software, fix it. And especially when they release a beta release for the next version, or not even a beta, but a pre-beta or work in progress of something that didn't work. For people to actually participate, they need to have something to work. But for getting a community, you have to have forums, knowledge bases, a way people can comment, email lists. I spent probably the early days of MySQL, half of my time helping others writing documentation and half of doing development. And what we did back then that nobody did, you need to do more to help people. When I started with MySQL and did the first release in '96, most of the open source code that you could get was in source code. And You had a repository, you took it, I put it on my Sun machine and tried to compile it, and most projects actually failed. Just some little thing that was missing, header files or calls, everything else. So we wrote a lot of scripts that when we updated things, that we actually had to go and patch the things and to get it to run. So what we did with MariaDB, actually MySQL, was that we was one of the first companies who actually did binaries. And we did binaries for 10, 15 platforms, almost from the start. That way we did know that this will compile everywhere, it will work with different compilers, and we got much less problems than most of the projects I said. But that's still a lot of the setup to do a build part for doing that. There's tools now, so it is that way. You also need a good team, and you need, in most projects, somebody who's seen as the leader who will tell the community, this is the way we do it, and the community will have enough trust in him to follow him. So that's what you have in Linux, MariaDB, MySQL, and Postgres. Actually, you don't have that in MySQL anymore. So if you have a problem, you don't have anybody who you can complain to. You can complain to Oracle, but that's kind of it. Oracle is not the leader of projects. You need, and also MySQL doesn't accept community contributions. They have all their repositories closed and so on. I'm not blaming on MySQL or anything else. Oracle wants to do it the way that they do. But the question is that if you do an open source project and want the participation, you need to do it differently. You need also to teach people how to code, so otherwise you will get contributions that you can't accept because the code is just so bad, no test cases, no documentation, no comments, different coding styles. You don't want to have different coding styles in the same project because that makes the code very, very hard to read. Most people can adapt to, okay, this project has this coding style, and this other one has something else, but within the same file, you don't want to see things completely different. And for getting a product that actually works, you need developers to actually use in the product. And that was one of the reasons MySQL was successful, because when I developed it, I was using it every day myself. And I was always using the latest version. So any bug that come up, I was the one who was first hit by it. And generally the quality of the product is defined by the leaders of the product. In open source, you don't get trust by paying money or having big advertisement for things. The currency in open source and free software is trust. People trust you doing the right thing because you are transparent. And then this goes for most companies, even in kind of semi-open source license like Open Core. If you're not transparent, people will not believe you, especially if you do something wrong and they don't understand what you are doing, because then they start to think that you will do more and more things. That's why we never added any closed source modules to MySQL. First, I wanted to give MySQL totally free, get a great license, great way to force a small group to pay, so we didn't need that. But looking at some other companies who are trying to do an open core model, and then they say that, oh, this is no suddenly closed source because we need forcing people to pay. As soon as you take some component from open source to closed source, people will think that, what will you do next? You will lose trust, you will lose users, and then move to something else. There are lots of examples of projects who are failed because the developers, or actually the investors, got too greedy because they wanted to force people to pay without thinking about the consequences. So you need to be transparent and open about everything, including your bugs. In the early days of MySQL, people were, some of them new investors and salespeople were nervous that why do we have an open bugs database? We shouldn't tell to anybody that there's bugs in the product. Which from open source is totally stupid because we want people to file them and help us fix them. And it took a lot of convincement of new management in MySQL in the early days that everything should be open. Oracle doesn't publish all bugs because they think that, oh, some of those are security issues. actually I want to know about the security issues. I don't know if they will affect me or not. Oracle will not tell you. I'm using Oracle example because I happen to know them, what they are doing with MySQL better than anything else. You also need to communicate with the community, attend conferences. I have been on all OSCON conferences except the last because no OSCON has moved to something that doesn't include databases. So I don't have much to do that. But I have attended about 10 conferences a year. In the early days of MySQL, I was the one working at home, and David Axelmar was around and attending conferences. I think that during the early 3-4 years, he was probably traveling 250 days a year. This was before he was married, so he could do that. So this is a good way when you are young and doesn't have a girlfriend to see the world before you are tied down. No offense. But communicate. And there's something you need to understand about working with open source developers is that ensure that questions are forwarded and answered. Most projects, if you go to a forum and look at it, there's lots of unanswered questions. That means that you have lots of frustrated users that ask the same question over again and doesn't get help. And that shouldn't happen. With MySQL, I ensure that all questions on the mail list was answered. Every single email was answered. So during the first 5 years, I helped people by answering some 30,000 emails. And that was a big part of creating MySQL. And with the knowledge base in MariaDB, at maximum I have seen 10 unanswered questions. So we are very active to ensure that people get help. Because if they get help, they will be happy and they will go forward and probably continue using your product. These are the things that is not kind of obvious. If you have work on a project and some person give you a larger piece of code, you may be the one who have a company in best case, or you are the one leader of the project. But you should understand that to keep that person engaged for the future, you need to treat him as he's the owner by the code, not about maintaining that part. So even if you would notice that, hey, we could do this much better, instead of you putting somebody else trying to fix it, first ask the original author, is this okay? Do you want to do it yourself before trying to fix it yourself? Because the worst thing that can happen is that he gives you code because he needs that particular code to solve some of his problems. And then you go and change the code so it doesn't really work for him anymore. He will probably not be very happy and stop using your product altogether because you are making life harder for him while while he's trying to help you. Don't expect the community to produce any code. Lots of companies who go to open source release the code, and then they expect lots of developers coming and starting to work for free. That will not happen in the beginning because usually when people have contributed to the project is because they have downloaded the project, installed it, used it, liked it, and they notice that either they're a bug or they need some other feature. And that takes time. And only then they start to contribute because they actually see that, hey, this is a useful product for me. And that takes time. So with MySQL, I think it was almost 1 year until we started to get some larger contributions. We only got a few. MySQL is a complex product. And you need to be a good open source citizen, so people actually will trust what you're doing. You need to provide good feedback. Somebody gives you a patch, you need to review it. You need to tell them these are things that you need to change for getting it accepted. And if they do the changes, you need to quickly build that into the code. That was also one reason I created the MariaDB Foundation. So we have 3 persons who are ready to jump on any patch that comes into MariaDB. So we are very active with that community. Don't talk bad about competing projects. You can do fact-based comparisons, doing a benchmark I showed you better, but don't just go and say you shouldn't use this because of that. People will not believe you if you can't say why. And most project has, especially a different one, there are good points and bad points. Then you need to say that this is better in this case, we are better in other cases, and be true. One of the reasons MySQL is more popular than Postgres was that in the early days, Postgres had some trolls. Not the developers, they're real nice people, they are friends of me. But they had people who were so passionate about Postgres and were so disappointed that Postgres was not the most used open source database in the world, that at any article about MySQL, they go in and say, you shouldn't use MySQL, it's really, really bad, stinks, you should use Postgres much better. And then they had lots of lies, why it was better. They basically hadn't read up anything. So people totally lost the trust in the Postgres trolls, and that reflected Postgres. So, be a good open source citizen and try to talk good about yourself. One of the mantras in open source, release early, release often, especially the first one. I've been visiting so many companies who say that we're going to release this open source, and then ask, so when it's ready, when it's completely bug-free, when it's gone through all this testing. That's wrong, because in this case you don't know early. Is there something that other people are interested in? Is it somebody that somebody else is doing or planning to do? If you do want to do something open source, release the plans early, have all the code in GitHub or some open source repository, and let people comment and look what you're doing. There's no reason to hide it if they actually want to release it. And then they tell me, but code is not so good. Nobody cares. If it works, people are happy. If it doesn't, you don't have a business anyway. And you need to work with distributions to ensure that the product is easily accessible by everyone. So that was about creating an open source project. We will go to the business part. Any questions? Anybody here actually is full-time involved in an open source project? Good. And all the others, you should be ashamed that you didn't raise your hand. There's so much to do in open source. There's so much business to make. And you can make the world truly a better place by making good software available for everyone. And still make a living. And you don't know how, I hope this will take teach. But any questions? Who doesn't speak English? Raise your hand if you don't understand. So, open source, really good way to spread the code, get better code, be able to develop in direction that you never intended the product to be used. So get a better product. But the problem with open source that somebody sees open source as religious. You can only do it in one way. You have to follow the guidelines. And when I've been talking with some of these biggest open source and free software supporters, they say that the license will take care of everything, including your business. And then I ask, so how do you do that? And the answer is, it's not for me to know, it's for you to find out. That doesn't really help if you don't make any money. So it's a philosophy and a development model, but it doesn't guarantee that you get any money at all. And that's the problem. So there are different kinds of open source products. You have products developed by the community, Linux, PHP, but that's typical larger projects that lots of companies are involved with. They have a free license and they can afford to put developers on it because they can use that in their products. Linux, PHP, Apache, and in some way MariaDB, as we have companies like Google and others who are participating. But if you want to create a product company and actually earn a living doing open source, this doesn't help you. We have products that are tools. and there are tools within the company. Because if you have a worker for a software company by internal tools, you will not make any money on those. And in many cases where it makes perfect sense to release those tools for others to use, and maybe create a business around that. Actually, there are many companies who are asking, so we have these and these things in house, should we release it? If you actually can put away a little bit of resources to maintain an open source product around it, then you should do that. And you may get business on that, or you can create a sister company doing business. And then the hardest part is those that you have a small team, you have an idea, you want to drive it, you want to compete with open source to beat the big guys. And then you have a hard time finding money how to do that, if you don't find a way to leverage the business. And we have MySQL, GBoss, WordPress, and most open source software developed by one company in that area. So this is more about creating what kind of company. We want to have a virtual company. A virtual company is important for me because MySQL was one of the first truly virtual companies. I was in Finland. We have David Axmark, the second founder of MySQL in Sweden. The first person we hired was in Yugoslavia. The next was in Germany. We just hired the best people everywhere. And that works good for a small software company. Are you going to create a company of equals? Monty from AB, who was created to develop MariaDB, used something called the hacking business model that me and Zach Grant, another person working on MySQL, created together, which is a company where everybody has an equal share of the company based on their input and the importance of the company. All the rules can be easily found on the net if you search for hacking business model. And the idea we had was that when we employed somebody, we were told that the rules of your employment is here's your title, here's your salary, and here's what we expect you to do, and everything else about code of conduct and things, how you work with your fellow people in the company, I described in this. So this is something I encourage to look at if you want to create your own company. And then the question, do you want to do services or development? There's nothing wrong to do a service company. Like you love some products, you think that let's do a little company who make consultant service on that. That's perfectly fine. But you will not get investors for that project, and you will not get a own user base of yourself. So this talk is more about how to compete with the big guys. And also question, how a big community do you want to have? You want to plan to take in investors as someone. And I would say that this is the most important slide of all. So you have, looking at it from an investor point of view, there's two kinds of companies. The people who are doing support and consulting, and people doing a product. Assuming you have two companies, both are making 1 million or a million in revenue. One is doing services, it means that that company is worth 2 million. If you can sell licensing or force some part of your user base to pay, you're worth 10. 2 versus 10, just based on your business model. And that's why MySQL was sold for $1 billion. Because we made 70 million in revenue, that makes 700 million, and the rest, Sun said that because we had some 50 million installations, and that will give us up to 300. But without having a possibility to sell licenses, we would never have been worth that. We would have been worth 140. And also, if you create a company, you need to also define the final goal of the company. You want to be sold in the market, otherwise to be sold to Google, Facebook, whatever, go public. With MySQL, we always wanted to be, go public. That was our plan. And we had everything ready, and we were about to go public in March when Sun bought us in January. So Sun said, don't go public, we will pay you better. You can also be a traditional company that just are using your money to scale. So you, as you start to earn more, you earn. When you start to earn more, you employ more people. And that's what we did with the MySQL group in the beginning. The first 5 years we did grow organically, but then we decided that we actually want to truly compete with the big guys to do a product that can be used everywhere, and truly change the price of databases. That's why we took investors. And with MariaDB, we can't do any of those. We can maybe get sold, but we have a problem with evaluation, so that's one reason I created the MariaDB Foundation, to have people who get paid by members to do the things that nobody is prepared to pay for, like reviewing patches from the community. Nobody really can afford to pay for it. By having a foundation, we can do it. So why going open source? Because you want to have more users, more development, get more things tested. You want that easier to find good developers. People often ask me, so how did we find the original developers of MySQL? Did I hunt them or anything? When you have open source project, you see people started to contribute, answer the question, the email list, helping others. I employed almost everyone based on our conversational emails. Because then I already know, this guy has really nice patches, he knows his stuff, he is helpful with others, and people like to interact with him. I never had to look at the CV or anything else, or where they were from, if they were, or what kind of person they were. I just employed. And then we had meetings once a year that could see that, oh, you look like that. Nice to meet you. And with open source, we try to get much more market recognition, feedback, get people installing your product, testing it, and getting into their company without you doing anything. So why are people trusting open source vendors? Because there's no vendor lock-in. If you're doing a product and you are not delivering what I need, I can ask him to say, hey, can you fix this for me? So you are not locked in for just your vision of the product. If you go out of business, then somebody else can continue, or I can continue if I have a big company. And sometimes vendors stop supporting the version that you are using. I mean, so many times I know at Microsoft that they have discontinued the products that I'm using. If they would be open source, that would be happy and I could continue using that forever. And of course, there's very little risk for hidden trapdoors. Nobody can access your data, which is, at least for database, very, very important. So for developers, why do they like open source? Because I like open source because if there's a bug, I can actually file a good description why it failed and even get into source code. In some cases, even provide a patch for it, so I can solve my problem right away. And that will make me happy and the developer. So I'm giving quite a lot of patches to different projects for when it's failed for me. And also for companies at large, open source is much better because you can develop things without having to depend on other countries. So in Russia there's a big push for replacing most commercial closed source software from US because they don't know if there are any trapdoors. And as a country, Russia can't accept that. So they're doing it. Brazil is doing that for other reasons, purely economical. I don't know if there's so much that you can secrecy in Brazil still. And of course, no license cost is a good thing. And having a country that actually embraces open source, they can actually start selling services around it. So it's good for the country around. So when to go open source? With MySQL, I always wanted to participate. I had some small little programs that I wanted to open source, but they were just kind of tools. But to go open source, you actually have to do a lot of work to get them to be as similar to the tools that they should be part of. You need to document, you need to keep it up. It's a lot of work. So I wanted to wait until I had something that was good enough so I could concentrate all my time on doing that. MySQL was the first product that fit that description. And as soon as I had MySQL ready, the first version we were using internally that I called 1.0, David said that, hey, let's do this open source. Now we have something. And it took us less than 5 minutes to decide, okay, let's do this open source. But we had our own tool set for building it. Let's rip all that out, change it to using configure and everything else. That took us about 3 months. And then we released it. But we thought that this is obvious too. So when to go open source? When you think actually you can compete with other companies and get enough money to do that full time. MySQL was profitable after the second month after the release. So, what open source license to use? So the question is, what are your business idea? Are you going to sell services, or do you want to have a product? And what rights do you want to keep? Apache and BSDs are really good licenses, but they will only allow you to do a service business. If you don't want to be a product business, you need to do something that is viral in the sense that you can force people to pay. In MySQL, we had about 1 in 1,000 paid for MySQL, and it was companies who were like Adobe, Cisco, who were embedding MySQL in their closed source product and didn't want to release the closed source product as open source because GPL would force that. So they paid us, and they got the identical code, except that they changed the headers in the source files to say that this is commercial product. You don't need to release it as GPL. So that's what we got most of our money from. So I think there's more than 100 open source licenses, but these are basically the most important ones. Public domain, you can do anything. BSD, Apache, you can basically do anything except remove the copyright. LGPL for libraries, you can do anything with the code, but if you change the code, then you need change that code. Then you need to give it out. GPL, if you combine that code with closed source code, everything has to be open source. And AGPL, it's the same thing like GPL, but GPL only works when you distribute the code. So if you have a closed source code on your own web server combined with GPL, that's perfectly fine. It's only if you give that to somebody else and sell it to somebody else. So you distribute to somebody else, then GPL attaches, but AGPL attaches right away. And this was why iText was able to do many with AGPL, because there were lots of websites who were using iText. And suddenly they would have to release everything. So they decided to just fail license. So, no questions whatsoever. This slide has to be very, very clear and very, very smart. Or you're just smart people, either way. Or you're just sleepy after drinking too much tequila yesterday. Okay, so there's not many business model that actually works with open source. And so the most common one that people have been talking about is, except dual license we use for MySQL, is open core. But the problem with open core is not an open source license, but people describe it wrongly as an open source license. I will describe all these licenses in detail. My personal belief is dual license is absolutely best one if you have a infrastructure product. In other words, other people want to combine the things that are usually closed source. You have also service models, but then you also are in the your company's only worth 2 times the revenue. The same thing goes with subscriptions. So if you want to create a product company developing open source, these are the only 3 models that I've heard about at first. So open core. This is what Oracle is doing with MySQL and Enterprise doing with PostgreSQL, adding closed source features, and if you want those, you have to buy it. Suppose Enterprise DB have PL/SQL extensions that they are selling. Oracle is selling features like a thread pool, but we added that to MariaDB, so they're not very successfully selling that. So everything Oracle has done closed source, they have done open source with MariaDB, but anyway, so they are trying to do that. But the problem is that this is not an open source business model, because all the freedoms that you expect from open source disappears with open core. As long as you are using the closed source part. So open core actually don't explain it there. So that means that you have a core of something that some people can use. That's completely free, maybe GPL, and then you have closed source modules that you hope that a lot of people want to use. And if you want to use any of those, you have to pay. So you basically combine closed source and open source. And you can do that if you own all the code yourself. Or the code is BSD or public domain. Then you can also create your own open core model. But for anybody who's using these open core features, they can't do anything. This is like a closed source project. And that's why I don't like it myself. And I would never want to use a program like that if it's not exceptional much better than what I have otherwise. I would just regard this as a closed source project. I'm using lots of closed source projects, and nothing wrong with that. And if this is the only way that you can make money, then you should do that, because after all, your job as an entrepreneur is to create a company. But you shouldn't think that this is an open source model. That's the point. Then you have dual licensing used first by GhostScript. MySQL was the second product who used dual licensing, and the first one who used that combined with GPL. So you can give out the code in the 2 licenses, GPL or iGPL and normal commercial, and those who doesn't want to use the GPL will pay you. So we got of the 70 million revenue we had in the last year, I think about 45 or something like that was for license. And in the early days, most of our income did come from that. So this was what created MySQL. But it doesn't work for everything. It only works for infrastructure. So if you're creating the best video player in the world, there's nobody who wants to embed that for something else. They may embed some of your libraries, not the whole one. So you can't make money with your license on that. And that's why open source are failing today. We are looking at how open source is spreading, Linux and most things that we have on the desktop. You can get as free software. Look at your mobile and all your apps. How many of those apps are open source? Very, very few. That's because you can't make money. And that's why open source is failing on the business side, not on the development side. So that's why me and David Axmar, we created business source to solve this. Actually, we did it because we had people with MySQL who wanted to do MySQL closed source. We didn't want to do that. And we were talking about creating monitors and other things that will be closed source. So we invited this one because I didn't want to have an open core model. Unfortunately, we were overridden by the board and the management team, so the MySQL Workbench project is closed source. Actually not Workbench, with the MySQL monitor, but I never wanted to do that. So this is not an open source license, but why I like this one is because it has most of the things that people like with open source. So all source code is available, and after X years it automatically becomes open source. So it's much better than open core because there's no only one vendor, and it's investor friendly. In other words, you can go with this model and tell that we actually can force some people to pay, and you can get people investing into you. So, but in this case, for calling it business source, everything that you usually release is open source. So your license says that you can use it for anything, but in these cases you have to pay. And then you put some restrictions that will fit for those parts of the companies that you think should pay. So you can say that if you're non-profit or if you're open source, you can use it freely. But if you are using this for more than 10 gig of data in a production environment, then you have to pay a license. So, what has this to do with open source? Except that it will become open source eventually. The thing is that there's no vendor lock-in. Anybody can work on the source, give patches, contribute to it, fix it. You can have another person doing support on it, because all source code is available. All the benefits for developers are there. The only caveat is that those who actually can afford to pay for it and actually makes money on it has to pay. The nice thing with this one, it enforces a good behavior, because for this to work for investors, you have to do frequent releases, because each release in the header, it will say that on this date this become GPL or BSD, whatever you prefer. So you know that this copy of the code will be free at someday. So for you to be able to continue with get the revenue in the future, for each release you basically put it X years, 5 years, for example, from the day you release the code. That way the thing, the latest versions get new dates. But if you go out from business, those who are using it knows that, okay, for 5 years, if that's 5 years, I have to pay some license fee, but after that it's completely free. So recommendations, I usually say 3 years if you can, but 5 years if you are unsure about things. You can always make it smaller later. And for this to actually work so that people will feel comfortable with what you're doing, you should only have a small portions of your user base to pay. In MySQL we had 1 in 1,000. If you have millions of users, having 1 in 1,000 have to pay, it's a really, really good business. And the bigger your free community is, the more people will help you and contribute, because people are contributing for helping themselves. So there's no reason why they wouldn't contribute to this one, even if there is not completely free. Because after all, if you're actually developing it, you get money to make it better, that's good for everyone, because they will get a better product over time. And that's what everybody wants. And don't try to combine this with other licenses. So originally created around 2004 by David and me. I talked about this in art at an interview, I think it was 2012, when somebody asked me, so do you have any other ideas that can change the world? Then I mentioned, yes, we have this business source idea that I would actually like to work more on. And there were lots of people who thought that this is what we will do with MariaDB. Of course we can do with MariaDB. MariaDB is based on MySQL, which is GPL. MariaDB based on that code. We can only be GPL, we can't get its license. But that wasn't why I started to talk about this. The reason I started to talk about business source is that there were so many companies coming to me and getting investment, having an Apache license, and I couldn't invest into it, because there were no way I can guarantee to the people who are backing OpenOcean that we can actually make 10x the money back. That's something that an investor expect from a company when you're doing support or services. There's no guarantee. You need to have license. So I started to talk with companies about that, and also some reporters and so on. And there's, you have an article, you have some overview. I wrote actually 2 academic papers around business source. Fred Trotter is doing something similar. He calls it open source eventual license. And here is the discussion about it, and here is his version of the license. The thing is with his license, it's not as explicit as business source to say that everything has to be released. But still, the same idea. Lots of people was confused about my intention, and they don't understand that this is so that we can actually create more open source projects and actually have commercial, successful open source projects. For me personally, I think it's good enough that I have the source available, and if they make money, I'm happy. And of course, in this case, I know that if something goes away, happens, this will eventually produce more and more open source. So I think this is a good balance between trying to be an idealist and believing in open source, and also trying to be an entrepreneur and creating a product and a company you can be proud of. And you can tell your wife and children, hey, we actually can afford food today. It's very good to be able to say it. So we have some companies who are using it. I've been talking about this for now 2 years, and there are lots of people say that we are going to use that, but I actually haven't followed up with all of them. I know that Bassbox did it. I know that some other people have been talking about that. I haven't just followed it, they have done that. So, the importance of selling licenses, or actually forcing a small part of your community to pay. MySQL, we could never done that. And it's back then in '96, people did understand the open source. So lots of companies bought licenses, even if they didn't want that. Some of those paid for support just because they were used to pay. Nowadays, it's incredibly much harder to get money, and you have companies like Twitter who refuse to pay for anything if they can get it for free. And that's also why you see like the problem with SSL, Heartbeat, and so on. Open source just doesn't get enough money. So you need dual licenses, open core if you want to be that way, or eventually open source for doing the thing is that subscriptions are very good, but they're really hard to sell, and investors are not going to pay money for you if you say that your business is based on only subscriptions. License is free money. The nice thing is that you develop something once and you get paid it over and over again. So with MariaDB, as I said, currently we are doing mostly subscriptions, but we are creating some eventually closed source products around MariaDB to manage it. I'm not trying to convince them to do that business source, because I think that's just a better way to do things. And that's up to the board to decide what we do. And the investment firm I was part of funding was Open Ocean Capital, which is the Finnish investors. We have 4 funds. First was MySQL. In the second fund we invested in 6 companies. Fund 3, we raised 40 million and we have invested in the 12 companies. And we did announce last week Fund 4, where we have gathered around 100 million euros that we're investing into companies in Europe. So if you have a brilliant business idea that involves technique that will change the world, and you have a massive user base, or believe you can get a massive user base, I'm the right person to talk with. So questions? And we have a nice one.
Yeah, don't worry.
All right. So suppose I'd like to invest my time and code for MariaDB.
Yeah.
But how do I know I really work for community, not to please you investors? Because as far as I understand, investors are behind your company.
Yeah, they are, but the thing is that everything we do is released to the community, and around half of the money that's put into the company, both revenue and investment, is actually going to keep the developers happy.
Yeah, but that was exactly the situation what you had some time ago with MySQL, when it's been sold to Sun and then later to Oracle.
Yes, and the product is getting better, and the more people than ever is using it. It's still free. The problem with MySQL that I made a mistake that I didn't guarantee the freedom forever because I didn't ever think that MySQL could be owned by a company who may not have the best interest of MySQL in time. That's why I created the MariaDB Foundation, who guarantees that the code is always open. So nobody can close the repositories, but they are not owned by the MariaDB Corporation. It's owned by the foundation, which is non-profit and working for the community. So that's the guarantee.
Yeah, but what's the relationship between the foundation and the MySQL?
We are working on the same code base, but the more thing that I guarantee the freedom forever. The thing with MySQL is an open source delivered product, which is not a community product. I can't get a patch into MySQL if I wanted to, because Oracle can say no. But in this case, it's not the corporation that decides what goes in the code, it's the foundation, and that's your guarantee.
Yeah, because for me it's a little bit confusing, because when I hear just some public information like around maybe $30 million of US dollars has been invested for the last 5 years to MySQL and MariaDB, so I'm thinking, okay, there is a company behind MariaDB, it's getting all this money, and at some point it should return this money to investors.
It's probably
in which way? In which way? If investors may sell stocks to whoever they want.
They can sell it, but the main asset the MariaDB Corporation has is the developers, and who is working on the code. The developers can leave; they are not slaves. If the company gets sold, and these developers doesn't like the new company, they can go and form a new company, run MariaDB, and continue working on it if they want to. That's the freedom they have.
Yeah.
My hope is that MariaDB Corporation will be sold to some company who will continue developing MariaDB as an open source project that is developed by the community. That's why I created the foundation. So if somebody buys it and continues developing it, they can only do it together with the community, because the foundation is the one who owns the repository.
Yeah,
they can of course.
I'm just thinking the investors are not stupid. They invest money and they want to return something back. If they know they're investing in open source product, which is going to be free forever, why would they invest?
Because the MariaDB Corporation has 2 ways to get to pay money back. Either they go on the stock market like JBoss and Twitter, in which case it will be, they still can't do anything with the source code because we're bound with GPL. So I'm happy that my product is guaranteed to be open. So they can then they can create new products around the server that will be open. They have already a max scale. They will probably have a enterprise features for that product that are only available with customers. But that's not the server. I only care about the server because that's my baby, and the foundation is taking care of that.
So actually, you have nothing to do with Maria company.
I'm a funder of it, and I'm in the board because I want to know that they don't do any stupid decisions that will badly influence the development of MariaDB. But I'm not involved in any of the daily operations.
Yeah, because again, for me as a kind of user, the man who is go to MariaDB.com, I'm seeing, okay, there is a kind of, okay, MariaDB.org, there is MariaDB, open source, everything is fine. But then I go to MariaDB.com and I see, okay, there is a enterprise version which has closed source included.
And not in the server. They have they are buying
the enterprise and plus this visual editor.
And that's a commercial product that they have that they're licensing for another company and making a package of. So it's just a collection of packages with support, which is totally okay because they don't own that. So, but the server is exactly the same as the normal one. They do release things at a different time. So they currently they, when we, the foundation, released the community server, they wait 1 week to see if there were any bugs with it. In this case, they released the enterprise server with exactly the same features and everything else. If not, they wait 1 month so they can be sure that no unexpected bugs goes to their customers. But that's basically it, and that's perfectly fine. Anybody can do that.
Another question about the kind of relationship between.
And just to know what happens when you ask a question, you get vodka candies, and somebody around you will also. Ask questions and enjoy. They are very good. Finish candies.
Another one. Yeah. So maybe 2 or 3 years ago, again, you've been in Riga here, and it was just after, I guess, Oracle bought MySQL.
That was 6 years ago, yes.
Okay, maybe 6 years, but afterwards.
Yeah.
So I think you did all your best to tell that to put this message that Oracle is doing bad thing and MySQL is going to die.
Possibly, yes.
Yes. So now again there is a MySQL 5.7
Yeah.
with seems to be nice features released
Yeah.
by Oracle, performance improvements and so on. So my question is, did you change your mind
No.
or no?
No,
Not at
and the
all.
reason they are doing that is because if they would stop developing MySQL, they would know that MariaDB will take over. And if you look at many of the features that they have done and pushed into the directions for making the application better, they're copying what we are doing because they don't want us to have big user base.
Yeah, but
And
I
if MariaDB wouldn't be there and we wouldn't be in all distributions and actually taking over MySQL, I'm pretty sure that Oracle wouldn't do as much work as they do because they don't earn any money of MySQL. They don't get any benefit of that. And you're looking at Oracle logically. If you have a service that, in the best case, brings them 100 million of revenue, but that's from customers who would otherwise use Oracle, for which they could get 100 or let's say 1 billion in revenue. They are losing 1 to 10 for every MySQL installation. That's stupid. And they're not stupid. Oracle only cares about money. So they are doing that because they believe that they are disrupting the marketplace in some way, and that's and the only reason for that is because of MariaDB. Logic.
Yeah, but still, it seems, again, it seems to me that, for example, with the release of MySQL 5.7, there are some kind of nice, nice features which made developed by Oracle engineers, but it seems that MariaDB and maybe Percona database service has to catch up.
Because they don't, Oracle doesn't publish anything they do until they do release. Between the RC and the GA, they push 400,000 new features of code of new features, which you should never do. So their total development model is not open source, it's not commercial, they don't care about the quality, just pushing features and get it out and make it look good. Thomas Alin said that 1 year ago that they have fixed 20,000 bugs in MySQL 5.6. A release that has 20,000 bugs, you shouldn't, at least it was several lot of thousand, I think, something like that. It's totally ridiculous amount of bugs in MySQL. And because they just put, for them it's much more important, of course, all of this is my opinion, but to show that they're doing something than actually doing something. But the main thing is that if Oracle actually should care about MySQL, shouldn't they publish one single statement where they actually promise a future MySQL and that they will continue it for the at least development for 5 years or for the future? They haven't done a single one.
Yeah, but there are, well, to be
They
honest,
have done that for all the other products.
No commercial companies may promise this thing, actually.
Yeah.
Is there any promises from Microsoft or Red Hat?
No, but in this case with MySQL, it's a community product. It should be developed like an open source product with the community. They don't care about that. They don't have a community. We have much more developers on MariaDB than Oracle has on MySQL. We get code contributions from others. We actually have taken over in all distributions. And this continues. MySQL will not exist after a couple of years. And the worst thing is that they are making things, we are doing things first, and then doing the same things, but that they are intentionally making things incompatible with ours. Even if we could tell them that, hey, here's things that we are happy to give you the code to ensure that compatibility. They don't care about that. They don't talk with us. They're not even invited to their conference about MySQL future. They don't care. And how can you trust a company who doesn't do any promises? I created the MariaDB Foundation as a promise that this will always be open source. You don't have a promise from anybody else.
Yeah. Maybe another question. So you
let's see first the business models, and then we can talk about MariaDB. Does anybody has a question about the business model?
Probably not.
Okay.
No, maybe the last. Yeah.
No, then you can continue. If everybody else is happy to hear this, I don't have a problem.
So, okay, there's, again, a little bit confusing. There's a MariaDB Foundation and a MariaDB
Corporation,
commercial corporation, and you have a developers under foundation.
We are both developers under foundation and under corporation. Corporation developer works on features for the customers of MariaDB. We work with the community to ensure that people can understand the code, give patches, get patches reviewed, and patch it into the server. And we keep the server open. That's our job.
Yeah, and who's paying developers? The foundation developers?
Members. We have. I had a talk yesterday where I talked about the foundation and the members. So the members are MariaDB Corporation. Actually, not one of the larger members. We have Booking.com, Visma. We have Parallels. We have
some big companies.
Yeah, big companies. And we are trying to get more. If you want to ensure that we are free, become a member. Talk to your company and become a member. That's the way you can ensure, see everything that happens. You can influence decisions, how we work with the community, everything. Everything is driven by the members. And having these members guarantees the freedom.
I'm asking because we are developers of Zabbix. Yeah, maybe you have heard of Zabbix open source monitoring tool.
No?
And we do free software.
Yeah.
It's absolutely free. We don't have any commercial entities. It's open source, and we are doing pretty fine without doing any kind of enterprise versions of our software. It's GPL-v2.
And do you get anybody buy licenses for it, or do you only sell support?
We sell support. We sell. Okay, the customers may pay for additional features that we include.
But that's consulting. So do you do anything else than support and consulting?
Training and also
Training.
kind of part of consulting. And
So that means that your company is valued 2 times your revenue. The question: would you like it to be worth 10 times? And in that case, you need to have something that you force some proportion to pay, and you can get investment.
No, I can get investors anytime.
No, you can't. Not at a reasonable valuation.
Well, I have no plans to become a billionaire. Yeah?
No, but I didn't have a plans to become a millionaire. But I wanted to have enough money to be able to have a development organization about 20 people. How big is your development the organization that only does coding?
It's about maybe 12 up to 15 people. We have 35 people total. We have offices in Tokyo, headquarters in Riga. We have people in New York. So I guess we are doing
Then you are one of the exceptions. I know about 3 or 4 companies who have been successful in growing. But the thing is that if you want to grow to 100 people, you will not get investors for it.
But why should I?
Because if you want to create an even better product, if you want to be able to have 100 developers work on the product and create a product that actually will change the world, you can't do it with that model. That's what I just talked about. I wanted to have MySQL installed on every single device that existed. I didn't succeed with that. But still, I got 80% of all websites, so it's pretty good. I could never have done that without actually getting money for the development.
True. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so any more questions?
One question.
Somebody will ask you.
How do you actually make companies pay for your licenses? I mean, the process with who controls it? Are there any authorities or something?
with MySQL we didn't have any problem at all selling licenses, because we had companies who thought that this is the best software for their use, and we only charged $200 for license. Except if you bought it in bulk, you could get it down to $1.
And if someone doesn't want to pay, then
No, if you are open source, you don't have to pay. You mean how do you monitor if somebody is misusing you?
Yeah.
Was that the question?
yeah.
That's the best thing that can happen to you. So we had the first thing. You will always, when you are doing open source and spreading it out, you will have people who think that they are too cheap to pay. They think that we don't need to, we don't want to. Why should we? We shouldn't make money. We shouldn't give money to anybody else. You have those people, and there's nothing you can do about it. But the thing is that if those people become successful and actually want to sell their company or go in the stock market, they will have problem, because then they will have people coming and looking at all the books and everything else and notice that this is a problem. So we did have a company who wanted to go to the stock market. The investigation showed that they were using and spreading MySQL without having a license. So one day, one of our salespeople got a guy coming in, knocking on the door, saying, "We have a problem. We have kind of misused your license, and we have done for a couple of years. We know we have been bad. How much do we have to pay?" It's a nice situation to be in. This is true. So let people misuse. Those who can afford and are honest will pay you, and there are enough people who will do that.
Any more questions? Okay, let's do some closing words.